Genesis 38. Genesis 38 verse 1. Now at that time, Judah went away from his brothers and became the friend of a man of Adullam named Hira. Genesis 38 verse 2. And there he saw the daughter of a certain man of Canaan named Shua, and took her as his wife. Genesis 38 verse 3. And she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Er. Genesis 38 verse 4. And again she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Onan. Genesis 38 verse 5. Then she had another son, to whom she gave the name Shelah. She was at Chezib when the birth took place. Genesis 38 verse 6. And Judah took a wife for his first son Er, and her name was Tamar. Genesis 38 verse 7. Now Er, Judah's first son, did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so that he put him to death. Genesis 38 verse 8. Then Judah said to Onan, Go in to your brother's wife and do what it is right for a husband's brother to do. Make her your wife and get offspring for your brother. Genesis 38 verse 9. But Onan, seeing that the offspring would not be his, went in to his brother's wife, but let his seed go on to the earth so that he might not get offspring for his brother. Genesis 38 verse 10. And what he did was evil in the eyes of the Lord, so that he put him to death, like his brother. Genesis 38 verse 11. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, Go back to your father's house, and keep yourself as a widow till my son Shelah becomes a man. For he had in his mind the thought that death might come to him as it had come to his brothers. So Tamar went back to her father's house. Genesis 38 verse 12. And after a time, Bathshua, Judah's wife, came to her end. And after Judah was comforted for her loss, he went to Timnah, where they were cutting the wool of his sheep, and his friend Hira of Adullam went with him. Genesis 38 verse 13. And when Tamar had news that her father-in-law was going up to Timnah to the wool cutting, Genesis 38 verse 14, she took off her widow's clothing, and covering herself with her veil, she took her seat near Enaim on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was now a man, but she had not been made his wife. Genesis 38 verse 15. When Judah saw her, he took her to be a loose woman of the town, because her face was covered. Genesis 38 verse 16. And turning to her by the roadside, he said to her, Let me come in to you, for he had no idea that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What will you give me as my price? Genesis 38 verse 17. And he said, I will give you a young goat from the flock. And she said, What will you give me as a sign till you send it? Genesis 38 verse 18. And he said, What would you have? And she said, Your ring and its cord and the stick in your hand. So he gave them to her and went in to her, and she became with child by him. Genesis 38 verse 19. Then she got up and went away and took off her veil and put on her widow's clothing. Genesis 38 verse 20. Then Judah sent his friend Hira with the young goat to get back the things which he had given as a sign to the woman, but she was not there. Genesis 38 verse 21. And he put questions to the men of the place, saying, Where is the loose woman, who was in Enaim by the wayside? And they said, There was no such woman there. Genesis 38 verse 22. So he went back to Judah, and said, I have not seen her, and the men of the place say that there is no such woman there. Genesis 38 verse 23. And Judah said, Let her keep the things, so that we may not be shamed. I sent the young goat, but you did not see the woman. Genesis 38 verse 24. Now about 3 months after this, word came to Judah that Tamar, his daughter-in-law, had been acting like a loose woman and was with child. And Judah said, Take her out and let her be burned. Genesis 38 verse 25. And while she was being taken out, she sent word to her father-in-law, saying, The man whose property these things are is the father of my child. Say then, whose are this ring and this cord and this stick? Genesis 38 verse 26. Then Judah said openly that they were his, and said, She is more upright than I am, for I did not give her to Shelah my son, and he had no more connection with her. Genesis 38 verse 27. And when the time came for her to give birth, it was clear that there were 2 children in her body. Genesis 38 verse 28. And while she was in the act of giving birth, one of them put out his hand, And the woman who was with her put a red thread round his hand, saying, "This one came out first." Genesis 38 verse 29. But then he took his hand back again, and his brother came first to birth. And the woman said, "What an opening you have made for yourself." So he was named Perez. Genesis 38 verse 30. And then his brother came out with the red thread round his hand, and he was named Zerah.